Hello, everybody. Florida State. We're going to make this short and quick and to the point. A lot of folks have been asking me about this. You know, we do a lot of baseball content and the football content, but today is a day for the Florida State Seminoles and their action against the ACC. A lot of folks have contacted me wanting to know what is going on. We're going to make this short and sweet and to the point and just kind of lay out for the average fan, those Seminole fans, those non-Florida State fans that just want to know what in the world is going on with Florida State and the ACC. So if you missed it on Friday, December 22nd, Florida State held a board meeting. And then shortly after that, which the board meeting was televised online, shortly after that, the Florida State University sent a lawsuit into the district court there in Tallahassee, Florida, against the ACC. And basically, what they're trying to do is exit the ACC without having to pay an enormous penalty, which has been rumored up around $572 million. It's a little disingenuous to call that a hard number for a lot of factors. Number one, there was a signing of an agreement by the ACC and ESPN back in 2016. So we're talking about a little over 7 years ago, in which there would be agreement in place if the ACC wants to pick up the agreement for 2027. They have yet to pick that up. So that is a key part to this. They have yet to pick up said contract. And I think a lot of this will go into when you start talking about the negotiations. But if it is picked up, it would go from 2027 until I believe 2036. The biggest problem with this entire thing, if people are wanting to know, okay, grant of rights, which is held by media partners and the conference, there's a couple of strange things that go on here. Number one, we have found out that all the contracts held by the ACC and ESPN on the grant of rights, they will not allow anyone to get a copy of this, which is really odd. So the only way that you can go over the contract is you have to go and make an appointment at the ACC office in North Carolina and go in there, and it was laid out that you were not allowed to take pictures, notes, et cetera, et cetera. What you have to do is go in there and read it with your legal team. Then they have to, by memory, go over what is going on with it. Now, so that across the board is already weird. I mean, that is like, it's a Bruder film type of kooky. Why would you not be able to see what it is that you're agreeing to? So already off the jump, I've already got a lot of question as far as how in the hell is this even legal? But you put that aside, and the strangest part about the ESPN ACC agreement is there is not room for negotiation. So you see conferences like the Big Ten that has the largest dollar amount agreed to, and I'm sure the SEC will eventually get to that as well. But the SEC, the Big Ten, they constantly go into renegotiations. And the latest one with the Big Ten, I believe, was $3 billion. And the ACC is just slowly has incremental increases every time there is a re-up. So they're already off the jump. Basically, what Florida State is saying is, you are not allowing us to make the money that we could make in other conferences because of the screwy agreement that you made with the ACC. And this agreement started in 2010 and got re-upped in 2012 and then once again in 2016. But you're talking about going on almost 15 years ago. So it is insane to think that you would constantly just re-up the contract. And what it really comes down to is the ACC commissioner's office has been going into these negotiations at a point of weakness as opposed to a point of strength. So already that's one of the things that they're going to lay out in the lawsuit, is that basically you are hurting Florida State's ability to make money, and make no mistake about it. People can say what they want about what happened with the playoff committee. We all know it was a sham, but you can say what you want where they talk about, well, they wanted more eyeballs on the TV. Florida State is a top 10 brand in college football. The numbers show it every year. The television numbers every single year. Florida State is well into the top 10. Even on their down years, Florida State is up atop the college football world as far as eyeballs, fans, etc. The fact that the conference in 2016 negotiations of the grant of rights with no representation. So when they agreed to this continuation of the deal and adding into the grant of rights, which by the way was added after the original agreement, which is one of the reasons why Florida State has basis for this lawsuit. The fact that they're not allowed to bring in representation is a little insane. And what the lawsuit is basically saying is there is a big difference between saying that you would have to pay some kind of a penalty to leave the conference. But anytime that you're talking about a penalty being paid, it has to be within reason. And the $578 million is just not within reason. Now, Florida State's looking at loopholes in Florida state statute law to get them out of this across the board. And that's why they are claiming that they should not have to pay a dime. So you got the ACC saying, well, when it's all said and done, $578 million. By the way, I do want to lay out the fact that it's not all in one chunk that whatever is decided with the money, they would not have to pay it with just one check due on Monday, per se. What they would have to do is that as the season progresses each season, what you're really having the rights for is money owed to you for your home games because you were in a conference. So, for instance, when Florida State plays all the big boys that they tend to play out of conference, like the Floridas, the LSUs, and whatnot, if they're on the road and those games are being played on their network, previously CBS, but now Disney is in bed with the Southeastern Conference across the board, so it would, in theory, be the same conference, but the same broadcast system. But you're only talking about the money owed per home game. And with that per home game, it's throughout the entire season. So you're not paying for all years in advance. You would have to pay as it goes. And basically what it means is the money never comes out of Florida State's pocket, but it never goes into their pocket. So that's what you're looking at there. But what Florida State's saying is that they shouldn't have to pay a dime. ACC saying, no, you should have to pay several $1 million every single year. It's being broken down to roughly, we'll just dumb it down, around $50 million a year. So what Florida State's saying is that they shouldn't have to pay any. ACC saying, no, you should have to pay. We'll just, for argument's sake, just say $50 million a year. And that's where this all comes into play. Florida State, from the Florida antitrust laws, they're talking about restraint of trade. And so the ACC, what they're going to try to do to try to avoid Florida trust laws is that they're going to try to have it tried in North Carolina. That's why they did a preemptive strike and filed their own suit. Well, the legal experts say that doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter if you file yours first. Now, you would have had egg on your face if Florida State would have came out yesterday and nothing would have happened. They weren't filing a suit. Then North Carolina, the suit that was filed in North Carolina would have been for naught, and the ACC would have had a lot of explaining to do. But it did happen, and really this is going to come down to where it is tried in. It doesn't realistically matter, though Florida State wants it tried in Florida, and the ACC wants it tried in North Carolina. Regardless where it is tried, you're going to have to adhere to laws of the state of Florida, one of them being the restraint of trade and other antitrust laws. And you're talking about, by the way, the reason why it was broadcasted is something in the state of Florida called the Sunshine Law, which basically means because Florida State is a public university, they can't do things behind closed doors. Kind of like what the ACC has been doing with their negotiations with their, I don't know what, I would love to know what is in those contracts where they are keeping you from taking any kind of notes and having any kind of copies. You would think that if you are a part of a contract for a conference, that not just Florida State, but Clemson, Duke, North Carolina, you'd think they would all have a copy of it. So that out the gate is already a really strange thing. But what Florida State is essentially trying to do is they're trying to get out. The next big date for the average fan who's not going to follow this day after day after day, your next big date that's going to come is going to be August 15th of 2024. If Florida State does not declare that they are leaving the ACC to go to another conference by August 15th of 2024, they would have to play the 2025 season in the ACC. And that is a rolling number every single year. August 15th is the cutoff. What is going to happen? Well, what's essentially being figured out is Florida State at some point, I would think some point in this year, my guess would be in the summer, Florida State is going to announce that they're leaving the ACC to go to whatever conference. Now, they can't officially negotiate that until they say they're leaving, because that's the way that these conference and the NCAA is set up. But you best believe that there are backdoor conversations. And my guess all along has been that Florida State's heading to the Big Ten, though they would love to go to the SEC as well. There have been schools in the Southeastern Conference that have been blocking it forever, for decades. And I don't know if we're going to get over that hump. It makes a lot of sense to put Florida State in the Southeastern Conference, but think of it from the other side of it. If the Big Ten can get Florida State into their conference and probably eventually bring in maybe a Clemson or a North Carolina, they literally would be coast to coast. Because you've already got the additions of Southern Cal and UCLA, Washington, Oregon coming in to the Big Ten. Obviously, the Big Ten is predominantly up in Midwest country. You got Pennsylvania with the Penn State and Nittany Lions, and you would get all the way down to the state of Florida. And what that really means in the big picture is it's eyeballs from the television on your product. So I think there's going to be a bit of a bidding war between the two. And it'll come down to the Southeastern Conference whether or not they continue to listen to the schools that have blocked Florida State for years on this, or are they eventually going to say, shut up, sit down, we've had enough of you, we don't want, because from the SEC's perspective, they're not necessarily gaining much territory adding a Florida State, and we'll just say for argument's sake a Clemson or North Carolina. But what they are doing is they're preventing the Big Ten from coming into their territory. So there you have that. But when it's all said and done, if you're wanting to know, well, what does this thing mean? The $578 million is the high number. $0 obviously is the low number. I don't think we see either one of them. I think what you end up getting is you get some kind of a negotiation between the ACC, because quite frankly, not only is Florida State over the ACC and wants the hell out, the ACC is over Florida State at this point, and they want them out of there. So they're going to come down to a negotiation, a number. I don't think this lawsuit ever sees the day in court that everybody's worried about where it's going to be. Because if you get it to court, you're talking about discovery. And if you get it into discovery, then text messages and emails and all the stuff that the folks in the conference headquarters don't want leaked is going to get leaked. And it's going to be up for public consumption. So I think what you're going to essentially end up with, I've seen some numbers thrown around. I think it's going to be much lower than the $500 million, and realize it will be paid per year. So I would think if you're looking at, let's say they begin play in whatever conference in 2025, you're talking about essentially 10 years. And that's assuming that the ACC is picked up by ESPN, which may very well not happen, which would drop the number down drastically. Because if they don't pick up their contract because they see Florida State and Clemson and North Carolina, maybe even Miami, all bolting for different conferences, they're not likely to pick up that contract for the same amount of money. They would have to renegotiate, then the whole thing falls apart. And so I'm expecting it to be somewhere between 100 and 200 million that would obviously be paid over a 10-year period. So you're talking about paying somewhere between 10 to 20 million per year if the ACC stays together. And this could very well be the splinter that breaks it apart and turns it literally back into what it originally was, which was a basketball conference. You could literally see schools like Duke and Wake Forest stick together and say, we want to keep the ACC as a whole. And the other ones that are more invested into the college football aspect say that we want to go elsewhere. And it's not just the Big Ten and the SEC that would be knocking on the door. There's been a lot of talk that Miami could be going to the Big 12. So there you have that. We just wanted to lay that out for you. We'll get out of your hair, and as things come about, we will drop more of this on you. But y'all have a great day, and always go Noles, baby.